Ladies and gentlemen, we're here with Season 1, Episode 13, Season Finale, Bulletville. This is the end of Season 1. A lot of things come to a head. We've kind of been on a three-parter kick for a minute now, so I don't know what else to add to that. But it's okay, because the Previously On has got your back. Previously on Justified. Let's get... God, I hate those. I hate those so much. I hope Arcane doesn't have those. Because holy crap. Sorry, I know that's just the most pedantic thing, but it's actually been irritating me consistently every single time that they do this previously on bullcrap, especially since they do it every episode. Okay, sorry. So I've got your notes here. I actually hadn't pulled them up until now, Jesse Ward. Didn't want to look at them until I finished the episode. So, episode starts. Boyd goes to Ava. Hell of a place to start, isn't it? He's got her to apologize, which of course he means. I've given my analysis on this before, and that's that Mike Romano is trying to interrupt the flow of the streams. He's going to fail miserably, of course. I'm going to completely ignore that stuff, but I love the fact that he's being legit here. As I've already demonstrated, as I've already given my own analysis on the character, I think he is legitimate in his apology. He, of course, mentions the two big things, which, ironically, he considers to be the lesser crimes here. And then he gives it what he considers to be the larger crime. I'm not saying that all three of his crimes are bad, or high bad, or low bad, or whatever. Yeah, he's trying so hard, Lord Harrowmont, to not be threatening, and he's coming across as Mafia Don. But, I'm sorry. And the whole time he's consistent about that with her. And her reaction is to tell him, go away and never come back. And he's like, okay. And he leaves. Now, I'm just going to go spoil something for you. This isn't really followed through on in this episode. But considering both characters survive in past this episode, I'm just going to give a prediction right now, based on nothing other than analysis, that this is the beginning of Ava liking Boyd. Possibly romantically, but definitely personally. Because, think about her position for just a second. She didn't exactly have a good life. In fact, she had a terrible life. And then she killed her husband, who was a major contributor to that terrible life. And then some stuff gets thrown up a little bit, and then a bunch of people threaten her, and she's living in fear, and you notice that both times she's there, she's got her freaking gun at the ready, which heavily implies that she's essentially not sleeping and or is sleeping with her gun in hand, which is indicative of her mental state, because it also showcases that rather than do anything or go anywhere, she's decided to stay in her home, where everyone knows she is, and hole up, which is probably one of the dumbest things she could possibly do. I've actually mentioned this. So she's still not really properly thinking or emotionally processing what's going on. And she's freaking out right now because she knows how threatened she is and she's afraid. So that's not a good that's not a good mix. Meanwhile, the one person she thought was an ally, who, it's worth noting, is an ally, just, things are more complicated than that, she believes is no longer her ally, and she is now feeling abandoned by. So that leaves her in a very vulnerable state. And that's not a fun place to be in. So Boyd being legit to her, that's a lifeline. I'm actually a little surprised they didn't follow through on that in this episode. The closest we got was the two of them being surprisingly decent to each other when under siege by the gunrunners, which that doesn't really count. But I'm telling you right now, and don't confirm if I'm right or wrong, because I don't want to spoil for anybody who hasn't seen Season 2. No, that's totally where that's going. I also like that Boyd reaches out to her unprompted. And meanwhile, Johnny, he's just wigging out. He's doing his thing. This helps establish a lot about how pathetic Bo's crew actually is. In fact, this exact episode shows two examples of just the difference, the gap, in between Bo's crew and Gio's crew. There's a scene where Bo's crew are like, hey, the people running our $2 million of illegal drugs are late. Okay. They're getting high and drinking booze and just chilling and complaining about someone being concerned about it. Meanwhile, flipping that a little bit, on the other side of things, we see Gio's crew, and there's this bit where the dude, who I don't remember his name because I don't care, is like coordinating with one of the snipers, one of his fellow runners, and it's just there's an air of professionalism and actual competence about it, as opposed to the hicks who have no idea what they're doing. Yes, he did hair him out. We'll get to Johnny in just a minute, because then, hey, Johnny goes out to grab Boyd. I don't like this scene. This one scene doesn't work for me. It's actually one of two scenes in this episode that don't work for me at all. So, Johnny thinks they're taking over. Now, Johnny has had several bits of characterization not too long ago about wanting to be legit and not wanting to be a part of all this nonsense. However, he is totally cool with not only being a drug runner, but then taking over for the drug runner, which personally I feel is a little bit disingenuous, doesn't really work. But the other reason the scene doesn't work for me is that Boyd has apparently been leading him on in this manner, which doesn't quite work as well for me. Boyd certainly he's not exactly known for being the most honest person in the world, but the fact that Boyd would be, hey, Johnny, help me out and we'll totally take over from Daddy, is a conversation that I actually can't believe happening. In fact, that's probably why it was shown off camera. So we wouldn't see it, so they didn't have to write it. Instead, we find out after the fact that Johnny is like, no, what? What are you talking about? You're stupid. Get out of here. And then just kicks him out. Boyd's like, okay. And Boyd just kind of rolls with things, which I'll come back to that in just a minute. Then something interesting happens. There's an old rule. It's not a hard and fast rule. That rule is Mockingbirds likes my hat. No, it's actually not a nice hat. It's way too big for me, but I shouldn't call attention to that because then you'll see how ugly it looks on me. It's a real hat too, real leather. Smells nice. I like it. Other than the fact that it's the wrong size. So, in law enforcement, when money moves in large quantities, it completely changes how law enforcement tends to react to things. Let me put this in very, very simple terms. Let's say Mockingbirds decides to come up and shoot me in the face. And so they'll be thinking, all right, crime of passion, maybe there was a grudge, maybe she was drunk or high or whatever, it's whatever, right? It's just something. Unless then they find out, as they're going through Mockingbirds' records, that Mockingbirds suspiciously came into about $1 million right about then. And that just changes things. Not just because of how they tend to react to the crime, but it literally changes the mechanisms of crime enforcement. That feels like the wrong way to phrase that. But it changes the legality of the situation. Because now different people have to get involved in different ways and different precepts apply that didn't apply previously. They use this is a real thing. That's what I'm trying to... This show consistently does its homework, and I'm just kind of doing my homework and showing how they did their homework, because this is my freaking job. It is literally a tier system. There's actually literally dollar amounts attached to certain tiers of legal reaction. It's okay, Mockingbirds. Frankly, I don't think I'm worth $1 million, so you are more than welcome. Do me a favor, though. Afterwards, go tell my niece to her face that her uncle is dead because you wanted $1 million. So, the direct reaction to this is they find out that Boyd destroyed a shipment worth a fairly large amount of ephedrine, or whatever the hell it was. Now, they don't mention the dollar amount, $2 million. But you'll notice how both Raylan and Mullen immediately change how they're reacting to the situation because of that, because the money got involved. Because, yeah, I like they're all really congested. So, my point is, this is what we call hard proof. If Boyd, if Boyd had not so overtly destroyed that shipment, they might still think he's working for Bo, or that he's trying to take over, or whatever. But if Boyd just destroys a couple $1 million of drugs, then they're like, oh. huh. And there's this wonderful line where Mullen says, we're going to have to rethink how we're going to approach this going forwards. And he's right, because not only has the tier been moved up, like I just spent too much time talking about, legally speaking, but now they've realized the situation isn't what they thought it was. And as much as Batman comics will probably try to convince you that cops are very anti-vigilantism, in reality, that's not as 100% true as is portrayed. And you can tell, they never say it, but you can tell the option is there. And Raylan and Mullen both consider it, of just kind of hands-offing for a minute. Just kind of let things do their own thing. Yeah, exactly, Jesse Ward. Like, maybe we're just going to let that situation resolve itself. Now, this also leads to the entire situation around Arlo being changed, which is a funny one. Because Raylan, who consistently doesn't have his hat on this episode, did you catch that? I'll talk about that later. It's going to come up. Raylan approaches Arlo differently this episode. And by differently, I'll talk about why and how. But it's fascinating because you get the really strong impression that with this change and his realization about what's going on with Boyd, it was just like a switch was clicked somewhere. Somewhere in the back of his mind, it's like, oh. And everything just sort of lines up for him. His relationship with Arlo, his relationship with Winona, which is only teased at here, but still, he reacts differently to. The way in which he's dealing with the case in general, the way in which he's going to be dealing with Bo, the way he takes ownership onto himself of several things throughout the course of the episode. You could tell there's just a switch that got clicked in the back of his mind there. And I love the fact that the impetus, the specific click, which actually fixes it is, oh, my best friend isn't a monster. Now, you might think, well, yeah, of course that would be the kind of thing. But no, really think about that for 1 second. Really think about the fact that you have a friend, probably your best friend. They may or may not be a good friend, but, you know, whatever. They're as good as you got. And, oh no, they're a horrible person. And it's my fault. Oh, jeez. Wait. They're not as horrible as I thought they were. Or, more accurately, they're not as horrible as I feared they were. Because not only is that a relief, it's self-reaffirming. Raylan is very good at reading people, and the fact that he has been so bothered about Boyd has been a consistent plot point for several episodes now. But realizing that he was right all along about Boyd, that there was a legitimacy there, and that he was approaching it right, and that he wasn't wrong, like I said, it's self-reaffirming. He has more confidence in himself, and he allows himself to be himself more. I'm going to just go and give this away right now. The theme, probably unintentional, of this episode is identity. But we'll circle back to that in a minute. Thank you, Deckfish. Hang on, let me put on the hat for the bow. There we go. Thank you very much, Deckfish. I will put that towards the BRPG block. You got it. Oh, by the way, Mike Romano, thank you for the sub. You never did say what you want to put it towards, though. So, back to my notes, which are over here. Yeah, they dug coal together. That's... Some people understand that immediately. Some people don't. I've noticed that. I'm one of the understands, by the way. I'm just going to give that away. No need to explain that any. We dug coal together. Railway Empire, Evil Genius 2, and Voyager. You got it, Mike Romano. So, Bo... Do you notice this is Bo's episode? He has more screen time in this episode than, honestly, several other episodes combined. And he is clearly the main character here. The camera follows him. Damn it. The camera follows him a fairly large portion of time. And just sticks with him. And yeah, it makes perfect sense. If you have... I've done this myself in my writing. If you have a starter villain, there's 2 points in time at which they should have the most screen time and most relevance to your story. When they're introduced and when they're kicked off. And here we are. So naturally, the camera follows Bo, and naturally, we see how Bo is reacting. And all the things I've been saying in analysis for the last few episodes are proven true. He really is a small fish. He really doesn't know what he's doing. He really does bludgeonly brute force his way through situations. It does work, but only so far. I mean, to continue the most obvious analogy here, a boar can push its way through some wooden planks and possibly a chunk of a wall, but you throw it up against like a bit of brick, metal, or solid concrete, all that boar is going to do is get a headache. And that's Bo. Thank you, Dark Prince Revan. As usual, if you want to put that towards up to 3 things, please let me know. Oh, there you go. Hang on, hang on. He is a pig. He is a total pig. He gets off easy. That's Dragon's Dogma, Arkham, and Ace Combat Zero. You got it. Where was I? So Bo's desperately running around trying to gather some degree of control over the situation. So he's just like, oh, God, all right, put them in the thing, and we're going to work through this. And he actually thinks... So here's the thing. I've mentioned several times that a recurring theme in the series is the application of the carrot and the stick, right? Who uses the stick and how, who uses the carrot and how those two dynamic with each other has been a recurring theme throughout the entire series. Bo consistently doesn't know what a carrot is. He consistently uses the stick over and over and over. It's all he does. It's all he knows. I mention this because you get the strong impression that Bo was already screwed because Geo. But he made things substantially worse because his first reaction is to threaten and belittle the Geo duo rather than anything else, right? Literally slaps the dude. Physically slaps him after imprisoning them. And it's like, all right, here's how this is going to work. You're going to call your uncle, and we're going to work this out. And it's the first implication of just how much Bo has absolutely no idea what he's doing and is in substantially over his head. To his credit, he realizes that. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. There's a wonderful step here that I missed, that I skipped over. It's one scene, very short. Arlo's in the office, and Mullen and Raylan are talking to him. Raylan, hat off, important, is chatting with him about the whole thing. Arlo does his usual tactic. It's something he's done every time he's interacted with Raylan. He tries to provoke him. Tries to anger him. He tries to troll him, put simply, in order to put him off balance or just to hurt him. He fails. For the first time, Raylan doesn't get angry and doesn't rise to the case. What Arlo says is, oh, is that the case that you screwed up because you were screwing with Ava? And Raylan's response is, yeah. Pay attention to Arlo's face, because Arlo's reaction to that physically is just kind of like he's a little bit surprised that it was just such a blasé reaction. He was expecting something. Just... okay. Because Raylan's found himself to a degree. He's a little more confident, a little more self-assured because of that switch I mentioned. It is Jesse Ward. Yeah, no, this is my fault. Okay. So, Bo decides to go after Boyd. This is the other scene I don't like. Obviously, there's some very dark, very unpleasant implications here I'm not going to get into. I'm not touching those with a 10-foot pole. But the main reason I don't like this scene is Boyd has no plan of action for the inevitable retaliation by his father. Why? And don't give me that it was God's plan thing, because Boyd has shown consistently that he has absolutely no problems planning and maneuvering his way around the people around him. This is, at absolute best, like the nicest thing I could say about this is a complete amateur move. It's actually probably the biggest example of bad writing I've seen in the series so far, because this is the definition of because plot. Boyd has no plan, no backup, no options, no trap. He hasn't called Raylan and the marshals in. He doesn't have people hiding in the woods. He hasn't moved his camp in any way. There's nothing. He just waits for the villains that he knows are coming, that he knows know where he is, to show up, and then kill all his people and beat the crap out of him. Don't buy it. And it is literally because plot, because it's the big instigating incident for Boyd. You'll notice both Raylan and Boyd have a big incident in this episode. Now, what sucks is, yeah, Boyd initially tries to refuse to leave them. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. And it's a good moment, but it's unearned. And that's my problem with it. So, negative to story. Or I guess, no, yeah, that would be negative to story in this case. It's harder to decide when it comes to a show which thing is gameplay and which is story. But we can do it someday. I'm going to do it someday when I have time, with the infinite amount of time I have. So, whatever. Complaint made. It does drag the episode down for me substantially because most of the episode hinges on this because plot. Speaking as a writer, I understand exactly how this feels, by the way, before you think I'm being unkind. Because as a writer, what you're thinking at all times is, this is where I need to be, right? They need Boyd. God damn it. I'm going to ignore that. They need Boyd to actually have his big moment, right? They need him to have that gut punch. But they don't know how to get to that point, right? It's one of the hardest challenges. I'm speaking sincerely. I've talked about this since I was discussing the Voyager videos 10 years ago. It's one of the hardest things for a writer is to figure out how to get from point A to point B. And what a lot of writers do is they just shortcut it. That's what we call because plot. That is the definition of because plot. Well, we need to get to point B, so here we are. I've actually been thinking of several things here and several situations in which they could have done this better. But if they wanted the structure of the rest of the episode to be mostly unchanged, probably the best thing they could have done here is to have Bo be more competent than he is, or have Geo move in a lot harder. Imagine Bo is trying to reestablish this control of this situation and blah, blah, blah. And he's talking to, the niece and the nephew, and they're like, oh, we've already made a couple of phone calls. What do you mean? Jump cut. Now, this is very crude, and this would take some smoothing out, but the idea here is that the gun runners who are higher tier and more professional have been running around finding the specific people that they have been given information thanks to Bo were connected to Boyd. So Boyd gets back to his camp, having been walking there since he left Johnny out in the car, because, he had to walk home. And there's a bunch of people all strung up there. And he's like, oh my God, because the gun runners came through and killed them all off camera. That's a very crude way to mend these plot arcs. But I only mention it because I do think there are other ways they could have accomplished the same narrative beats and not change the overall structure of the story and do it better. That being said, they do something cool with Johnny. Because did you pay attention to how Johnny really doesn't want to beat up Boyd at first? Then he starts to get angry. And you just see that resentment in there. That irritation, that frustration. And he starts to actually just start laying into him. Just start beating him. As opposed to the very methodical, very careful, one punch, pause, one punch, pause. No, he starts just going after him. It is an interesting progression. Poor Johnny. I wonder if he's actually dead. Don't answer. I mean, he got a gut shot, so he could survive that. Like, that's ironically... I mean, he could survive a lot of shots, but anyways. So. I lost my train of thought. So Bo continues his just-the-stick approach. Decides to make a mess. Tries to exile Boyd. I will watch Season 2. I could just look up a summary of Season 2. Decides to, kill all of these people. That's cool. That's actually horrifically terrible. Boyd rushes back, and yeah. This, wonderful praise to Goggins. As usual. Wonderful acting with his face, wonderful acting in general. He comes back, and there's just total shock. Total and complete shock. Can barely process what's happening. And he just screams. Then we cut to Bo, who is continuing to flail, And this is when I mentioned his further interactions with the two. Then we cut to Winona and her only scene in this particular episode. This one scene, God, I love Winona and Raylan's scenes. They're all gold, really. Gary's at the athletics club. Gary's living at the athletics club. Maybe that's one of the things we could talk about. Yeah, that sounds like something that should be talked about. But more importantly, in addition to the other things, the fact that they both feel the need to discuss this, yeah, that's significant. The fact that she's willing to just kind of tell him that. I've been pointing this out several times, but Winona automatically trusts Raylan and has done so several times. But usually that's in a crisis situation, which makes sense. Here we see that even for something personal and dramatic, something in the realm of the drama, she still trusts Raylan. Instantly. Volunteers that information. Isn't prompted. Her husband is not living with her right now. Okay, and we'll never know what that means. So, moving on. This then comes... By the way, I love the line. Yeah, you got till the elevator comes. Love Mullen. So then... Then Bo goes to see Arlo. This is a really good scene. Arlo and Bo have had 3 scenes total where they've been able to just act off of each other, and all of them have been good for different reasons. But my favorite one about this one is this is the first time Bo drops all pretenses and is just honest with Arlo. Did you catch that? It might be one of the only times he's sincere in the entire show. So he talks to him and he's like, listen, Arlo, this is going to be a thing. It's going to be hard, because of course it has to be. You know, like you see him slip into the attempted Mafia Don thing before it just flounders again. He goes right back into, so I need you to kill, my boy's worse. Yeah, my boy's worse. But I'm going to need you to help me bring in Raylan. And there's this tone that gets across the idea that despite absolutely everything, Bo regrets this. In fact, I say without hyperbole, this is my interpretation, that Bo feels worse about asking Arlo to bring in Raylan than Arlo does. You've known me for 50 years. Does that incline me to trust you more or less? Lovely line. And you scare me, Bo. I want to mention, because Arlo's a damned liar. He has told the truth like a grand total of 3 times in the entire show so far. And I think this, too, is a lie. Why should I listen to you? You scare me, Bo, more than the federal agents. I don't buy that for a second. Arlo has never demonstrated in any way, shape, or form that he has any fear of Bo. But of course he knows exactly what Bo tries to do. Bo tries to be the big, scary bull, when in fact he's just a pig. Yeah. Exactly, Lord Harriman. That is exactly the type. So, this then cuts to Boyd. Boyd. Yeah, exactly, Jesse Ward. Boyd buries all his guys, all his men. You ever do, like, real construction work or yard work? Because I have. I've talked about it a few times. It's hard work. You always think, oh, that looks like... No, that's hard work. That does something to you. And credit to Goggins for actually properly acting after having to dig these graves. You try to dig all these different graves. That is not easy to do. Yeah, just digging in general is actually really time-consuming and hard. And you'll notice that they, once again, showing their work, being a well-researched show, it is nighttime before he's finally finished. Because, yeah, that would take all day. In fact, if you were paying attention, most of them, there's dirt mounds going up, which means the actual pit is probably only a few inches down. Which makes sense, because if you ever have tried to dig down like a few feet, that's insanity. There's a reason that most people who do that nowadays hire machinery to do that for you, because doing that with a shovel, Point is, Goggins does a great job. He's clearly just exhausted, torn, just can barely deal with any of this, and he just collapses, groaning in pain. Then, this is so painful. He grabs his Bible, pulls it open, and then slams it shut, and then just sits there. This is the payoff that they didn't earn that I mentioned earlier. This scene has him just talking. He just talks it out. And he is, in many ways, just talking to himself. I'm not saying that literally. I mean, what he is saying is for himself, because this is all about Boyd and Boyd's identity. Unlike Raylan, who has now found himself and will continue to demonstrate, and I will continue to point out how he has found himself, how his identity is more locked in, Boyd's identity just got shattered. Twice. In a short period of time. And now Boyd's just sitting there going... And he asks for a sign. And your heart just goes out to him. Goggins nails this scene. Your heart just goes out to him. And then he says what is probably the hardest hitting line in the entire episode, and possibly the entire show. I wrote it down word for word. Maybe I've just been talking to myself this whole time. In total contrast to this, Boyd being broken down into glass, the next scene has Raylan come home to Arlo. Now, this scene, it would be so easy for this scene to be a bad scene. But instead, it's extremely well written. It's extremely tightly presented. Because Raylan comes in and shows... So, let me talk about what I mean about that a little bit. Because it would be very easy for the creators to have Timothy Olyphant make it obvious that he's on top of things. And that he knows what's going on. And that he gets it. But they don't. Instead, Timothy Olyphant, that is to say, Raylan, is just straight the whole time. Very calm. Because he is on top of it. He doesn't need to show it. He is in complete control of the situation. And he knows it. There's no hesitation. There's no fear. There's no anger. There's no doubt. He just walks in. Hey, what's going on? You want a drink? Drink my own alcohol? Sure, yeah, why not? And he's just very chill the entire time. Right up to and including when his dad tries to pull a gun on him. Nope. And I love the fact that Arlo is just... This is a wonderfully tense scene, by the way. When do I think he realized Arlo was trying to sell him out? The moment he offered him the alcohol. I think at that exact moment, he knew. Because Arlo, despite being a recurrent liar, is actually not a very good liar. Have you caught that? If you pay attention, if you're the kind of person who is analytical, you will notice every time Arlo lies, because he has patterns, and he uses tactics and techniques, and he uses them consistently. So he tries the put you at ease, try to reach out the olive branch kind of a thing. Yeah, exactly, Jesse Ward. I'm sure Raylan used to buy some of these lies, but he's not 5 anymore. So Arlo tries all the usual tactics. Small talk, you know. You're ever going to get married? You know, is that ever a thing you're going to do? I just want to know about the life I'm about to destroy, you know. Put you at ease, maybe talk about your personal life. And it's like, and Raylan's just like, no. And he's very honest. That's the best part. Raylan completely is just like, yeah, no. And just responds to him honestly. Because that's the great power of being certain of yourself. And I mean this with total sincerity. This is true in real life, too. If you actually have that level of personal confidence and certainty, then someone trying to run a circle around you doesn't work, because it can't, because you know they're doing it. You know how the cup game works? It works because you don't know there's a game being played on you. The whole way those kinds of deceptions work is because you don't know the deception exists. The moment you know someone's trying to scam you, the deception has failed. So Raylan is just, yeah, no. Yeah, I maybe remarry. I'm not very good at it, apparently. But you always have the girls walking after you. And you know, and once again, Yeah, exactly, Mockingbirds. Once again, Arlo's trying his same tricks. He tries the olive branch. He tries the personal approach. He tries complimenting him. You know, just to put him like, oh yeah, Mockingbirds, your hair, which I can totally see right now, is looking absolutely lovely today. And you just say something to compliment the person in order to put them a little bit less on the defensive. And he's doing all the usual tricks here. And Raylan's just like, no, I don't think the girls. And the whole time, in the background, you could hear the other truck drive up. And I'm sitting there thinking, why isn't Raylan reacting to that? And it didn't occur to me till after what I've already told you, that Raylan is picking up on it and already knows that this is a thing. And he's just kind of running through it, waiting until he is justified. So Arlo mentions this thing. Arlo... I never really, you know, we've never really been very close. And you could see him building up to the speech he's probably been building in his head that he was going to give before he shot his son and sent him off to be chopped up into bits by an alligator, which he knows, by the way. Raylan, of course, already has his gun out and just pointing at him. Very casual, hasn't even changed his stance. He's not, like, in battle. He's just standing there, completely casual, because he's on top of this, because he's got this. It's also one of the first times in the show that Arlo shows an emotion, a specific emotion, and that emotion is fear. You can tell Arlo is actually scared. Probably for one of the first times in a long time. Because Arlo is smart enough to realize it's over. As of that exact moment, his big gig as a CI, his side gig with Bo, it's all gone. And he might die right here and right now. That is a actual possibility, because he knows if his son has pulled his gun on him, well. So, wonderfully tense scene. And Arlo actually starts to say something about my son, and Raylan says, very calmly, no, don't call me that. And it is the way, I love the acting in this show. It is the way Raylan says that really hammers it down. He doesn't shout it. He doesn't scream it. He doesn't overemphasize it. It's just, no, don't call me that. Because he's not his son. So, right in the arm. I love the tempo of this. The pacing of this scene is fantastic. So what was supposed to happen? I was supposed to shoot you in the leg. And then they were going to come and take me. How? Okay. So the reason this is so funny isn't just because it's hysterical watching Arlo get shot in the arm. Almost wish he'd missed. But it's absolutely what Raylan needs to do to maintain control of the situation. Because he knows the gunshot is the signal. He could have shot wherever, but he also needs to make sure that Arlo is a non-combatant in what's to come. So, boom, and Arlo is now in shock and pain and is not going to be doing anything. Then what? Still very calm. Then what? Cut to the two thugs. Two thugs start to come in. Two thugs decide to try and pull a gun on our main character. That goes exactly as well for them as you'd imagine. Then the Crowders finally go after Ava. This is kind of a hard scene. It's the scene that I expected to happen a couple episodes ago, to be completely honest with you. It's exactly what should have happened here. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Mr. Red points out something. His gun is actually pointed down towards the floor until they decide to draw on him. Then he kills them. Actually, I think he kills one and injures the other. But the point is, he's still doing his freaking job. Which is important both for the fictional, we need to make sure the hero isn't a mass murderer thing, but also legally in real life. That is actually how that's supposed to happen. If you ever see a cop, excuse me, I shouldn't get into this, but legally speaking, if you ever see a cop approach a combatant with their gun aimed like this, they're actually doing that wrong. I don't mean like morally or ethically, that's a debate. I mean legally, they are supposed to approach a combatant like this and assume that they are a non-combatant, assume they're going to put down their weapon, assume they're not going to fire. It's only when you are justified legally, that's when you pull the gun up, and that's when you actually go into threatening stance. Big difference. Sorry. Raylan, of course, understands that rule and is a good enough shot to, be able to accomplish that. So they go after Ava. Yeah, I actually don't have much to add to this scene, except, again, I'm a little shocked at how long it took. And then, of course, they shoot Johnny in the gut. This is once again emphasizing just how much Bo really doesn't actually know what he's doing and is just making it up on the fly. He gives this whole speech. Pro tip, if you have a big villainous plan, don't speechify about it to the person you just shot. And there's a lot of reasons why, but the biggest and most obvious reason is because all you're doing is emphasizing how little faith you have in both yourself and your plan, which is Bo. We've already mentioned, I knew you were going to need that, Lord Harriman, because I know you just shoot people all the time. I already mentioned that, the Bo knows he's in over his head. I think Bo knew he was in over his head quite a bit before this, but if I ever needed absolute proof, this scene is it. He takes out someone who was willing to be loyal, in fact, someone who arguably was continuing to be loyal, and one of his very few henchmen. Keep in mind, Bo doesn't have very many henchmen. He has a very small retinue. Just to be this whole, oh yes, and I'm going to leave you here, and they'll think that she shot you. They ain't never going to find any sign of her. Twirl, twirl. Okay. Yeah, exactly. He does. You're right, Jesse Ward. So, then... I keep saying this. One of my favorite scenes happens. There's a lot of favorite scenes in this episode. What do you want from me? Which is good, because we did have that bad plot moment earlier. It never worked for someone like Bo. So Raylan's there, stitching up Arlo. Which is funny, by the way. Gets on the phone. Boyd walks in. Wonderful praise to both actors, as usual. Goggins... Raylan... Okay, so let's focus on Raylan for just a second. Raylan immediately was like, oh god, threat. Not threat? Hold on. Okay, I got something else to deal with. And over the course of the scene, Timothy Oliphant shifts bit by bit from being, you are my enemy, to you are my ally over the course of this one scene. And and I'm just telling you that because the way he acts is what sells all of that presentation. Boyd, by contrast, comes in already thinking you're my ally. It's his initial point. He is lost. He is confused. Where does he go? Where else does he have to go? So he goes to Raylan. Comes in, just confused, turned around, shocked, still a bit bloody, probably exhausted. No idea what he's doing, and just, oh my god, I don't know how to deal with this. And then there's this wonderful bit where he starts to talk to Raylan about what happened, but he's using that flowery language he's fond of. So everything he's saying is so vague it actually means nothing. I led my flock to slaughter. Okay, what happened? You'll notice he then drops that. Stops being metaphorical, stops using etymology, and instead just starts saying, he killed my people. Starts being straight for one of the first times in the entire show. Even when he was being the cult leader, he was still kind of pontificating a bit. But here he's just, they killed him. And the way he says it, the mannerism in which Goggins is doing this, is he is confessing. He is confessing his sins to Raylan. Because who else is going to listen? And Raylan, you could see, starts actually treating him seriously, which was mentioned by Mr. Red in chat as well. Starts actually being like, okay. Then, there's the hostage call, which is a pretty standard hostage call. Bo continues to be a disgusting pig. And you'll notice that when Boyd is asking, Raylan, without hesitation, without so much as a casual thought towards misinformation, just tells Boyd exactly what's going on. Just volunteers that information. Boyd then reciprocates in kind. I know where he's going to take you. He's going to take you to this spot. I know that spot very well. Please let me come help. So, Boyd and Raylan team up. I don't know how many other times this is going to happen throughout the course of the show, but I have a feeling that much of Season 1 has been building to this exact moment. So Boyd and Raylan are finally actually on the same side. Both of them. Both of them willing, both of them aware and cognizant of all the truths and all the situation, and honest with each other. And there's this wonderful line. You were being honest, weren't you? You were telling the truth. Now, the way Raylan says that is fantastic, but then Boyd responds, was I? Ouch. Again, I don't want to touch this topic with a 10-foot pole, but regardless of whether it is about a religious matter or anything else that exists in life, a conscience or crisis of faith, that's not fun. And you could, and again, God, I love Goggins in this scene, because he's just, no, Raylan, I'm so confused. And there's this really powerful scene, because it's obvious, and it's so obvious that you don't notice the subtlety of it. It's the GTA 4 effect, right? The obvious part, Boyd turns to Raylan and asks one of the hardest questions any human being can ask any other human being, and I mean that. And that question is, do you believe in God? Boyd, excuse me, getting my names confused. Raylan deflects, doesn't actually answer the question. You get the very strong feeling, can't answer the question. Sorry, I'm saying this wrong, because actually what he says is yes. Then Boyd says, tell me about your God. Then he deflects. And he deflects hard. He doesn't even try to hide it. He does that thing where you know you're lying and they know you're lying. And you're not lying to deceive them. You're lying because you don't want to tell the truth. Right? And so that's what Raylan does here. He's like, yeah, no, I believe in God, but I ain't going to tell you crap about it. Which is effectively what he says. And then Boyd's reaction, he understands, of course, so he just kind of lolls his head for a minute, and then he says, I started all of this, didn't I? And that moment is such a weight on Boyd's shoulders, but what makes it so much more powerful is the understated part, the GTA 4 thing I mentioned, because Raylan's response is, well, no, I shot Tommy Bucks. I do believe that is the first time in the series that he has acknowledged that he probably made the wrong call there. Oh, don't mistake me, Tommy Bucks needed to die. But Raylan did it the wrong way, and he did it for the wrong reason. And more important than that, though, it's about admitting fault. It's about what confession can and should actually be about. It's not about, oh, I did wrong. It's about, I take ownership of that. No, this isn't your fault. This is our fault. And it's a very, very well done scene in that car. Yes, correct, Lord Harriman. So then Raylan gives Boyd a gun. The whole episode, with very few exceptions, Raylan has not had a hat on. And I cannot assume, we talked about trust factor, right? How much you trust determines how much you can read into a thing, or how much of a mistake it is on the behalf of the creators. I think Raylan not having a hat is deliberate, because I think he doesn't need it to hinge his identity onto anymore. He knows who he is now. Like I mentioned earlier, the switch was flicked. He's found his confidence, he knows himself. So he doesn't need that hat. So he goes ahead and offers offers the gun to Boyd, which, okay. Because naturally, Raylan probably sympathizes with what Boyd's going through right now better than anyone else in the show that we've seen so far. Because Raylan has also had this crisis, conscience, no idea who or what I am moment. Yeah, among other things. So, they effortlessly rescue Ava and disarm and defuse the situation in literal seconds. And this is fantastic because they're the tutorial villains. They always were. I've talked about this before. I know this is kind of leaning into video gamedom as opposed to showdom, but the same rules apply in terms of narrative structure. You have your starter villain, and by the point at which you actually go after the starter villain, the heroes should be at the point where they can just kind of roll over that, right? They should be at the point now where they should just be like, oh yeah, and they do. By contrast, the duel with the gunrunners takes several minutes and is a lot more tense. It's also the duel of the episode, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Well, actually, there's a reason for that, Lord Harriman. I'll talk about that in a second. But then, Boyd comes out and threatens Bo. Has the gun. It's ready to go. And Bo does the same thing he has always done with everyone. He doesn't back down. I'm going to keep going forward. I'm not going to apologize for nothing. I'm going to continue to strong arm as if I'm in control of this situation. When he turbo is not. Even ignoring the drug runner situation, he is absolutely at the bottom of the barrel at that moment. Probably about to die. And even if he avoids death, his life and career are over. And yet he continues to swagger about because that's all Bo has ever known. At least that we've seen on the show. We don't know what he was like before prison. So, yeah, I agree about the whole episode's a duel. But this is the big duel. It's the duel within a duel. So Boyd starts talking it out. Notice Boyd hasn't completely committed to killing him yet, which is interesting and tracks. Bo, by contrast, is trying to goad him into it. Then he gets shot center of mass by a sniper round. So the reason the sniper went for Bo, yeah, no, that's right, I'm saying it right, went for Bo first, is because he's fat. Not a joke. Look at Walter Goggins for a second. The man's a twig. Now, have you ever actually had to shoot a target from range? Especially in real life where it's a lot harder to do than in a video game, because there's a lot of other factors and variables that are involved in that bullet getting to its target. You always go for center of mass, and you go for the biggest target first. That's actual military training in some cases, in some sects. So, of course he gets shot first. And yeah, it's just so pathetic, right? And there's just this moment of shock. Boyd is obviously screwed up by this, which is funny in its own right. And Raylan is like, oh god, and just immediately is in go mode. Then the next shot hits Boyd in the arm. Probably because he was aiming for center of mass, but failed at getting the shot. Then, immediately after that, the next thing the sniper does is just start shooting wildly. Now that may sound strange, but all of that is actually correct. You get the target you know you're going to get first. You only get one stealth shot. One. So you go with the guaranteed kill. That was Bo. Boom. Then you try to go for the next target you can, the next highest priority. Could have been aiming for Raylan or Boyd, considering the angle we see in this. It doesn't actually matter. Either way, it's a miss, and he hits Boyd in the arm instead. Once the gig is officially up, there are no more stealth rounds. There's no more surprise actions. You have lost all advantage. You need to get as many shots out there as possible and hope that at least one of them hits. Because if any of them hit, even to wound, you have advantaged your situation. All of that is straight out of the textbook. Also, I think Raylan would have let Boyd shoot him. I think it would have been an interesting and fascinating conversation, but I think he would have let him shoot it. Yeah, exactly, Mockingbirds. The only difference here is because the sniper brought a screening team, that's the crew in the truck, the sniper doesn't drop and run because, you know, this turns into a siege. I also love the bit where Raylan, who is of course on top of things, immediately turns around for roughly where the target is and just starts doing covering fire as hard as he can, which naturally works. Covering fire works for a reason. It's because there's a bunch of bullets flying in a vague area, and if you have a brain, you are going to go down into cover in order to avoid getting shot by a random shot, because, yeah, I mean, getting shot sucks. Trust me! So, Raylan, an injured Boyd, and Ava, who's been untied at this point, in a cabin with gun runners on the outside. Now, this is when we show what I mentioned already, that the gun runners are much more, they're much more coordinated, much more professional, higher tier than the random yokels who at this point are all dead. maybe Johnny, I don't know. And they do this whole thing, and it's cool, and it's awesome, but what I love is that Raylan is consistently one step ahead of them across the board. I mean, it actually would make a lot of sense, Imperial Star Destroyer. Remember, in-universe, it hasn't been that long since that moment. And if you have an asset in a region, you probably don't have a lot of other assets in the... Like, you're probably not going to fly a sniper out, right? You probably have someone that covers the Midwest. So, they probably had a sniper whose job it was to be the hitman for the Midwest. And it was probably called in the same guy to deal with the situation. Anyways. So Raylan is much more coordinated and competent. And, you know, starts using his things. Go shoot out there, shoots the one guy. Goes ahead and covers the sniper because he has a brain. It's funny because what the sniper does is actually correct. Comes in from the back, puts the gun down because the sniper rifle isn't super useful in close combat. Peeks in first. Nothing to see. Okay. Starts moving in. Raylan is right under the window, in as much of against the wall as he can be, ready for when it's coming. And if you're wondering how Raylan knew, it's because that window was a natural ingress point. It was a weak spot. And anybody with a brain will cover your weak spot first. If anything, the only mistake the gunrunners make is they don't understand how good Raylan is at his job. If this was just the yokels, like, honestly, even if Boyd was still there, and you just remove Raylan from the picture, they probably would have swept. Instead, what we now have is a siege. Sieges are messy, ugly and dirty things, whether it's a castle or a cottage. So, this sucks. And what I love about this is there's so much character stuff that happens in a very, 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 very short amount of time. So first, the other team has automatics. Automatics change the rules of gun combat, for lack of a better way to put that, in many ways, because automatics are a thing. Let's not get fully into that topic. But the point is, they have the quote-unquote home advantage. If at any point in time the group tries to run anywhere openly, they're going to be at a disadvantage because an automatic only has to hit you once. So, they understand that. Yeah, they fire full auto, which is just actually really stupid, but they don't need to be super high tier, they just need to be higher tier. It's like it's just a straight up AK too, which, you know, just saying it's an AK. Anyways, alright, it's not a real gun. So, all we want is Raylan Givens. Uh-huh. Yeah, sure you do. Sure you do. I do love the bit that she offers the deal. You know, sell out Raylan Givens, we're cool. And what I love most about that is that the immediate reaction to that from Boyd is, you know, I'm not going anywhere. I believe he actually literally said, I ain't going anywhere, they killed my daddy. Significance? Boyd's first reaction is, don't worry, I'm not going to betray you. Understandable. He also gives evidence for it, just so Raylan doesn't have to take him at his word. Raylan's response is, you came here to kill your daddy yourself. And his response, well, that's different. How? Well, you gotta kill two men that came after your daddy. You'd give me the same courtesy. And I love that because it's specific. I know, right, Jesse? Where Ava's first thing, could you go sacrifice yourself? Did you notice that Ava continues to be a selfish twat? Continues to be, like, the worst character in the series? But meanwhile, Boyd's immediate reaction is, no, I got your back. And I love that despite the fact that he says his motivation is because of the fact that they killed my daddy, the way he convinces Raylan of that is by telling him, in not so many terms, we respect each other. It is their mutual respect that Boyd pulls upon to convince Raylan that he's got his back, and Raylan believes him. So, Ava, of course, in addition to being a garbage human being, also, that's probably a bit too harsh, I'm sorry. There's much worse people than Ava in this show. Holy crap, one of them just died! In addition to being Ava, Ava also is nowhere near on the level of these two people. So Boyd and Raylan have already mathed out several steps ahead in this situation, because this is a siege, like I said. And sieges, they're kind of formulaic, actually. There's only so many different ways a siege can go. Trust me, we've had a lot of practice at sieges over the centuries. So, they've already figured this out. And Ava's like, why don't we just all run? And it's like, no, you don't understand. It doesn't work that way. Explain, 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 explain. Okay. So finally, there's this wonderful bit. And again, mutual courtesy. Raylan says, I need you to get Ava out of here. I'd like to think that Raylan has no real personal investment in Ava at this point. But he absolutely has a professional investment in her because he's a cop and she's a civilian. So, he turns to the only person he can turn to, and someone he has already trusted multiple times in this episode, who he's already demonstrated mutual respect for multiple times in the episode, and says, can you get her the crap out of here? Like, I love the little Spartacus thing. You being funny, little bit. Get her out of here. Okay, sure. So, this starts the mutual bullcrap. This is actually a very common technique where two people are lying to each other. Both of them know the other side is lying, and both of them are only doing so in order to try and shove the situation into a circumstance in which they can take advantage of it. Justified. Busanella. Bucanella? Busanella? Oh god, there's so many different ways. Yeah, I'm friendly. I don't suppose you'd flip on Geo. You're gonna turn on your uncle? No? Okay. Cool. That's cool. So naturally, none of that was ever gonna work out, and they go out. Boyd came back around, has the sniper rifle, is ex-military, and knows what he's doing with the damn thing. Shoots the dude. Dude's dead. Cool. She gets away. That actually bothered me a little bit. I feel like there were plenty of opportunities to kill her too, but whatever. And then we have what I can only refer to as the crux scene of the entire season so far. And for me, of the show, since I'm done with the show at this point. So Boyd's like, I'm going to go after her. What are you going to do when you find her? I don't know. You're going to shoot me to stop me? Maybe. Total and complete honesty with each other here. At no hesitation in telling each other exactly what they're thinking and feeling here. I think you're empty. You gonna bet your life on that? Nope. I'm gonna bet on you being the only friend I have left in the world. If I haven't mentioned it before, one of the big themes about this episode is honesty. Raylan has tried to kind of approach things from an honesty perspective since the very beginning. He tends to shoot straight, as we like to say. But in this episode, a lot of people have been a lot more honest about things, and it has turned out interestingly for all of them. So Boyd grabs the vehicle, turns to look, just you know, a little bit of a visual goodbye, drives off. Raylan watches him go. And scene. Yeah, then we hear a really good song, which is messed up if you're paying attention to the lyrics, but it's a good song. Oh, and that is justified. At least from my perspective. Now to spoil everything for myself on the wiki. I'll come back to that. I actually probably will, because I'm curious enough to see how that goes forward. Well, I do hope you enjoy Mockingburns. I think this show is, I'll talk about it in a minute. Let's review this specific episode before we move forward. So let's pull up the sheet. Short sheet, only 13 episodes. That's okay. That's going to be kind of a thing. We got a lot of short shows coming up. Arcane is 9 episodes for a bit of perspective. And then we're going to have the Donkey Kong Country show, which we're going to do 4 episodes on. And then we're going to hit some Star Wars episodes, which only have like 10 or so each. It's going to be normal is what I'm trying to say. We're trying to transition away from covering multi-year projects like we've been doing up until now. Now, I know you want to call this one purple. 2 weeks from now, Mockingbirds. There will be no Streamination next week. There will be something else. There will be a stream next week, and a video, and another video. 2 videos and a stream go live next week. Anyways, I can't call this one purple. I know you want to argue for it, Jesse Ward, and I see why. But I feel like it would be hard for me to call this a purple, partially for the same reason I would have trouble calling Fellowship of the Ring a purple. even though it's a damn good movie and probably is a purple. Because for me, Return of the King is the purple, right? So that's point number one. This feels like build-up, which is ironic because it's a payoff of several threads, but no. This is... I don't know the full details behind the scenes, but this, speaking as someone who's analyzed television and the makings of television for years at this point, this is making sure we have a second season, which is understandable, but extremely frustrating to me personally. Yeah, I have no doubt that Season 2, Episode 1 starts immediately on Boyd chasing them, or Raylan, dealing with Ava, or something, right? In fact, go ahead and spoil that one thing for me. What's the very first... What does Season 2, Episode 1 open with? Because I bet you I'm right on this one. Oh, apparently it's just the siege scene again. So there you go. Starts right where Season 1 ended. Yeah, I figured. So... No, I don't mean the previously on. Nobody cares about the previously on. But the final reason I can't quite give this purple is because of that plot moment I mentioned. It's such a thorn in the middle of an otherwise excellent episode. So, that still means... So I'm afraid... I know this is harsh, but I'm going to have to give this the second best rating I can give an episode of television. I'm so sorry. This damn show. In answer to Mockingburns, we built the current review system. Oh, thank God, Imperial Star Destroyer. When we were doing the My Little Pony Streaminations, which was the foundation of a lot of how we've been doing shows ever since, we came up with the color system. It's actually very simple. Lamentation is black, blue is awful, green is above average, yellow is average, orange is above average, red is good, purple is fantastic. 0 to 7, or 1 to 7 rather. So red's pretty damn good. It's in fact almost as good as it can be. So I'm going to go and do my end of show thing now, if that's all right. We're kind of making this up as we go here, because as much as MLP built a lot of how we do... God, I've got a bruise from the hat. As much as MLP built a lot of how we do these, MLP was still a 9-season behemoth. This is 13 episodes, just over 3 months of covering this. So, and again, most of the upcoming shows are going to be nice and short. So rather than do a big, fancy, time-consuming finale, we're going to sit here right now, and we're going to talk about it. So first and foremost, let me get a couple of things going here. Because I'm just going to do this the super cheap way. Nobody needs production values. Nobody cares. I'm joking, but I am going to do this kind of a simplified manner here. If you'll give me one moment. Why is this not working? Come on. There you go. Good boy. Alright. So first thing is, I want you to look at that list right there. I'll just kind of make it look a little bit professional. Just the beginnings of professional, not actually getting to professional. That is our 13 episodes right there, top to bottom and in order. The first thing I want you to do when you look at that is you see that we started hard, which is good. Any show you want to start hard, start right up there with a red. That's really good. Thank you, Lord Haramont. I do always appreciate those donations. I really do. I am, however, not going to interrupt the flow because, well, okay, hang on, fine. I'll interrupt the flow just for you. We're hitting the stream breaks. Usually on Streaminations, I acknowledge donations after. For reference, for those of you wondering, in order to maintain some of the focus, especially since these end up going live on YouTube as the rumination replacements. So that's going towards the Ratchet and Clank trilogy, Stellaris, and FTL. Thank you, Lord Aramont. I do appreciate it. Okay, so hold on. Okay. Look at that spread. And that spread is extremely good. So I talked about this about 2.5 months ago, 3 months ago, from my perspective. Obviously, you just saw the finale videos for Trek this week, but there's a lot of ways to interpret data, right? So let's interpret data. Right there at the top, what do we see? A red episode starting. That's extremely good. Let's use a bit of comparison here for just a second. So, Star Trek TNG Encounter at Farpoint. I haven't reviewed that episode, but at absolute best, that's a green. It is not a good episode. DS9, we have Emissary. Probably one of the better ones, still very, very weak. Yellow at best. Then we have Caretaker for Voyager. Total garbage. Definitely in blue territory. We move on to Enterprise, which has Broken Bow, which isn't a lamentation, but is absolutely blue. And that's normal. Most shows don't start strong. Starting strong is useful, is valuable, of course, and is desirable, but it's surprisingly uncommon. So, starting off with a red was bonkers. Then it dipped a little bit. I actually could tell you what that is, but I'm not going to, Mr. Red. Because I was keeping track by that point. That was post-MLP at that point. I also did that for Enterprise, which was a blue. I remember that one. Anyways, but, of course, we're really talking about The Cage, which would be the real first episode, right? Oh my god, it's lore reloaded. I thought he stopped existing. Before I get distracted yet again, then we have a little floundering. From a real-life perspective, from a behind-the-scenes perspective, this makes perfect sense, right? Because, and I said this, I don't want to dismiss this, because I'm very big on good remasters, and I'm very big on good remakes. But the one key difference between a remake or a remaster or whatever is you have the idea ready to go. You still have to make something new based on it, but you don't have to invent something whole cloth, so it's different, right? It's a different creative process. So that is functionally a remake, because that script already existed, that book already existed, right? Or short story, I suppose I should say. This is them trying to figure out what the show is, now that they've got a show based on the story that's already been written. So it makes perfect sense that those flounder a little bit. There's still good stuff here, I should probably mention. None of these are what I would call bad episodes. It's just, Then we have the collection, by which point a lot of the characters and personality has really started to codify and solidify. They're really starting to figure out what they're doing. Blind Spot, Blowback, Hatless, and by the time we get down to Hammer, they have 100% officially figured out exactly what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it. And then we get into the final trio, which is effectively one episode, and of course is red across the board. This is a very strong showing. This is actually bonkers how good this is. But to further emphasize how good this is, the goal... Jesus Christ. The goal that I've talked about many, many times, and I talked about it during the finale here, is you always want your works to be above average. Actually, I had one person disagree with me on YouTube, but they're wrong, because you want everything to be above average. There are a lot of variables that go into that. That's the ideal. So if we were to color this appropriately, as I did previously, sorry, this is taking so long, it's kind of a weird one. This is the first season of Justified. There's only so many ways I can say that's crazy without just getting to the point of repeating myself. But that's crazy. That is insanely good. I don't think I've ever seen a first season of a show which has that good of a ratio. And of course, if I was to pull you down here, you can actually see, whoops, wrong thing. You can see the wrong thing. If I was to pull you down here, you can actually see the pie chart, if you want to see it in a different visual format. There's our purples, there's our reds, there's our oranges. And that, yeah, that speaks for itself, I think. I don't know why this show is so good. If you put a gun to my head right now, I would probably say luck. That's usually why shows like this are so good. They just happen to luck into having a very, very good cast and crew and production and writers and directors and all the aspects of things. There have obviously been missteps. There have obviously been flaws. But again, we're talking about across all of television. That's how this system works. And I've covered a lot of shows in my time. And I think that's the best thing I could say about Justified right there. At worst, it's above average. Or actually, that's not quite true. At worst, it's average. But generally speaking, it is solidly above average. And thus, if anybody out there has never seen the show Justified and has no trigger problems with things like drugs or abuse of children or abuse of women or cops or prison or criminal matters, then I can absolutely recommend this show. I should probably mention, and I've mentioned this before, I have recommended this show to several people ever since I started watching it. And one of the more common discussions there that we have talked about, me and my friends, me and family members, is they've already seen Justified. So it's just been like a circle gushing thing, right? Like it's just, oh my God, this is so good, and I know this is so good, and I know this is so good, and I know this is so good. And we just kind of cycle around that for a bit. So, speaking as someone who's probably going to sound like an ignorant idiot, yes, this show is very good, and I absolutely recommend it. I do have to add those provisos, though, because it's too real for me. I've hinted at this before. The reason we're not continuing Justified, the reason I will never watch this show again, is because it is very well researched and very well scripted and very well designed to be about a lot of things that I have trouble tolerating, just in general. And it hits a little bit too personally, a little bit too hard in ways that I actually just do not have the ability to deal with. I don't have the HP I used to, you know what I mean? And that's why I added that proviso, that trigger warning. Pun intended. So now I'm going to go spoil the rest of the show for me, because I want to see how it ends. But I think that's actually all I got. This has been a fascinating experience. Thank you, Jesse Ward, for joining me for this. I do hope you well in your future endeavors. And that's about it. Next week will be the Diablo rewrite and April Fools. And we'll be doing a stream leading up to the Diablo rewrite, obviously. The week after that, so 2 weeks from today, we will start covering Arcane. Otherwise, we'll be continuing Diablo 2 next Monday.